Now, U.S. President Donald Trump spoke to an international audience for the first time after returning to the White House 3 days ago. This is his first major speech of his presidency to global business and political leaders at the World Economic Forum in Davos. He demanded OPEC lower oil prices and a drop in interest rates, and also warned them they will face tariffs if they make their products anywhere but the U.S. Now let's cross live to Davos and speak to our State House correspondent Adesua Omoruan, who has been on ground and giving us up-to-date information on what's going on. Adesua, thanks for joining us on Newsnight.
Thank you.
All right. Now, we just heard our Vice President Kashim Shettima making a strong case for multilateral cooperation. What else can you tell us about that 2025 Global Risks Report session that took place in Davos?
Thank you, Nkechi. So the Global Risk Report for 2025 was put together by the Financial Times. It's one of the flagship reports that usually released ahead of the World Economic Forum every year. And this year is no different. However, what was different was what they got, the response they got from respondents. Now, out of the over 90,000 or so participants, I may get that number wrong, 23% that I'm actually aware of did put the number one global risk for 2025 at state armed conflicts. And in the top 10 list, you also have issues like the climate, you have issues like economic downturn, you have geo-economic confrontations. Those issues make up the top 10 risks ahead of 2025. And those are the concerns of people around the world for the year. And so that panel session was discussing those issues, which Vice President Kashim Shettima was a panelist he was a panelist in that session, and he made a case. Vice President Kashim Shettima has been consistent with his message about Africa being the new frontier, about Nigeria in particular, given the size of our population, her geography, her youthful burgeoning population, that Africa is the bride, and the world cannot do without Africa. He made a case today to say Nigeria is focusing on kinetic and non-kinetic solutions to solve its problems, particularly when it comes to armed conflicts, when it comes to conflicts like the Boko Haram, ISWAP, security crisis. He says, we have a burgeoning youth. What do you do with them? If you don't engage them, then you have issues. And he's calling for multilateral organizations such as the United Nations to do more to ensure that there is peace around the world. And he also touted U.S. President Donald Trump. This was right before President Donald Trump spoke to global leaders for the first time since he assumed office. He touted Donald Trump as someone with what he called street credibility. Someone, he said, should be given more credit than is being given. He says he's more intelligent than people actually take him to be. He says Donald Trump assumes the position of being irrational, but it is on purpose to bring people to the negotiating table. And he says he believes Donald Trump can solve the global crisis, particularly that of Ukraine and Iran.
You know, I was just going to ask you about Donald Trump's remarks, his first sort of international speech just after being inaugurated as the U.S. president. Just tell us more about his speech where he reiterated that his America First policy. How was his speech received in Davos?
Where do you start from? If you sit down in Nkechi and list the topics that Donald Trump talked about today, I'm sure there will be more than a dozen. He went everywhere. It's been received with mixed reactions. So the thing with the rhetoric of Donald Trump, the perception of Donald Trump here in Davos and perhaps elsewhere in the world is that it's more of rhetoric than reality. Some here say he backs more than he will bite. But you see, the problem there is he has set in motion so much uncertainty. For instance, on NATO, he's calling for 5% of GDP spending on defense. Some will say even the US is not spending close to that. At the moment, US seems to be spending less than 3% of its GDP on its defense. So when he makes calls like that, when he says there's going to be tariff for everybody, I mean, the list is endless. Mexico, Canada, the EU, and anybody who is not producing in the US but wants to sell in the US will receive tariffs. When the US president says that, then you can only imagine the uncertainty that he has set in motion. Now, how far he goes with that, and whether he does it at all, is left to be seen. But then people are on the edge. They're thinking about how to react, how to respond to that. For instance, the NATO 5%, there have been concerns that majority of the member nations in NATO simply cannot afford 5% of their GDP spending on defense. And so the biggest fear for NATO members when it comes to Trump is, will he suddenly wake up one day and pull out of the alliance, just as he has done with the World Health Organization, the Green Bond, and others he is threatening to pull out from. So he made a lot of comments today, and I can assure you there'll be much more reactions in the days to come.
So I think a lot of analysts, a lot of experts align with your thoughts with the if Trump will wake up one day and just pull out of all the alliances. And, you know, just talking about what Vice President Kashim Shettima was reiterating on multilateral cooperation, and then you have Trump on the other side prioritizing domestic interests over global cooperation. There just has to be a balance. But I wanted to ask you, as Davos is winding down, what is some of the takeaways for Nigeria, for Africa? Are we seeing any partnerships in play in Davos?
It might be too early to say, to talk about the takeaways, Nkechi. You've rightly said Davos is winding down. For a lot of people, I guess after Donald Trump spoke today, it was the icing on the cake and it was time to pack their bags and leave. He has loomed over the forum for so long, and then hearing from him was just the climax. But for Nigeria in particular, we've seen Vice President Kashim Shettima participate actively in some sessions, some forums, some closed-door bilateral meetings that we haven't been given the details up until now. Today, Nigeria did sign a memorandum of understanding with the World Economic Forum and joined the Global Alliance for Women's Health, Action on Women's Health, Maternal Health, to help reduce maternal mortality, maternal risks, childbirth, and all of that. I spoke to the Minister of Health earlier today, and I asked him what exactly are the implications of the MOU. And he basically explained to me that he was sharing experiences, the World Health Economic Forum bringing in resources, but not in monetary terms. He didn't mention financial terms to me. He said the World Economic Forum will be pulling resources to Nigeria in terms of skills, manpower, and experiences from around the world to help Nigeria improve. But it's a two-way relationship, according to him, when it comes to the MOU. Nigeria will also be sharing with the world what it is doing differently. According to him, the world is noticing the difference, and Nigeria is moving the needle when it comes to the health sector and what it's doing with maternal health, women's health in general in the country. So there may be other takeaways that we are not yet aware of. I know I've seen a couple of ministers here that initially we didn't even know they were on ground. Rotus Odiri, my colleague who is also on ground, has spoken to a couple of them. Minister of Trade and Investment, Jumoke Oduwole, has been active as well. The Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun, is also on ground. Today, I did see from afar the Minister of Petroleum State for Oil, Senator Lokwebiri. Minister of Health, like I mentioned, is on ground. The Minister of Foreign Affairs is also on the strip. We have the head of the Investment Council, Promotion Council in Nigeria on ground. So in coming days, it would be nice to ask, as a group, as a country, what did Nigeria take out of Davos?
Very important question there, Adesua Omoruan. Thank you so much for being our eyes and ears on the ground in Davos for the World Economic Forum 2025.